It's Monday, December 3rd, 2012. I'm Rim.
I'm yawning.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight we're talking about network sniffing and what programmers don't understand about networks and sniffing.
Let's do this. So I'm going to lunch today.
Going to
and
lunch, doing your thing.
As happens in the city, you walk down the street. And
I went to Hale and Hardy, had a really kind of mediocre soup.
I had some overpriced sushi that weren't too bad.
Got a really, really shit cookie because they have the shittest cookies, and I really wanted a cookie.
Why did you get the cookie there?
Because I really wanted a cookie.
How much is the cookie there?
I don't know.
Sorry, like $2.
The problem is, then I get back to the office, and one of my coworkers is like, I brought brownies.
Woo! Anyway,
And they were good brownies.
So I'm walking to lunch, and fire engine's going down the street, and I'm like, okay.
The usual.
And there's the fire SUV is behind it. I'm like, okay.
All right.
I go to lunch. I come back from lunch. And I see that on the intersection outside my office, there is a great deal of fire and police
Now, it's
activity.
interesting because a few days ago, and I tweeted about this, the exact same thing happened to me. There were fire engines blocking like City Hall, and like they'd evacuated the park, and all the entrances were locked up.
Okay.
So anyway,
But something was going on in the street, and I couldn't really see, and I didn't give a shit that much, so I went into the office. I get to the office, I look out the window, I can kind of see, but I can't really tell what's going on, and I'm like, okay, something's going on there. So I go back to work, sitting down, eating the lunch, doing the work. A couple hours later, get up, stretch, look out the window. There's police all around there still. And I'm like, what could possibly have happened there that they're hanging out for hours? It's like, I figured, somebody got hurt. Maybe somebody fell, maybe someone car accident, something like that. And they just, clean it up in an hour and go away.
What's interesting is the same thing happened to me before, and I basically did the same thing you did.
Right, so they're sitting there, and it's been hours. It was like noon, and this was like at 3:30. They're still out there, and it's mostly police. They've got it roped off, and I can see the subway station on that side is closed, and nobody's going into the subway on my side of the street, which is not good because I need to go in there to get home without walking anywhere. So I go to Google, and usually when I Google for like ultra local New York news, it's not that easy to find it. Like, remember that time we were biking back from New Jersey and there was a fire? I tried to Google that fire the next day. I couldn't find shit.
Nah, man. Well, the thing is, the point I was going to make is that I have a pretty good success rate when weird shit happens in New York of finding out what it was.
Well, it has to be big enough over a certain threshold that a news truck will show up.
It just has to be in Manhattan as far as I've found.
This was in Manhattan, the fire.
Yeah.
Right? But
it's
it's like
that fire.
That fire, yeah.
I'm going to wonder if I can find that fire now.
Good luck.
Anyway.
It's like if the news breaks a certain threshold, then it'll be really easy to find because it's fucking New York City. But if it's like below, it's actually rather hard to find if no one reports on it, right?
I still think my idea for a website, I just want to call it whatthefockwasthat.com.
Yeah, why not?
And all it is you just log, locations.
Usually
and
what I
dates.
do is I try to search Twitter and Google News. Those are my and then I go to the New York news websites. The real way to find stuff out like this is have a police radio, but I don't have one of those.
I don't know how it is here, but in some places I've been, there are weird laws like you can own a police scanner, but not have it in your car.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's legal to take a police scanner, take the audio output, and stream it on the internet so someone can just go to the website and listen to like New York police scanner.
I'll bet it depends on state and city laws, but I will say this. When I was a kid, we had a police scanner, right? And in the old days, the way this worked is you'd get crystals for whatever channels. Like in a CB radio, you'd buy like the crystal.
Because if you just buy a scanner, they remove those channels as possibilities, and those are only good for listening at like race
It's more complicated than that. I'm talking like when I was a kid in the 80s.
Oh.
You really couldn't get a variable antenna or like a variable radio. You plug in a little crystal that would resonate and give you like so you'd buy like a channel 13 crystal for your CB radio. And your radio had like 3 slots, so you could have up to 3 crystals. I remember one day for my birthday, my dad got me a second crystal, so my brother and I could use 2 different channels on our CB radios.
Whoa.
That was awesome. But so there were channels for our police scanner. Like we had crystals for all this stuff, but there were some crystals that you weren't allowed to buy. My dad was a fireman, so we had all the crystals. So we'd listen to it.
All the crystals.
We left it on scanning all the time. So at night, there'd be like, we just find out about crazy fires and go watch houses burn down.
But anyway, so I go to Google News and I say 49th Street, and I immediately find. So it was some fight on the subway platform. Dude pushed a dude on the tracks, got hit, and died.
Not cool.
Not cool at all. Kind of weird. Why would it's like if I was gonna fight a dude, which I wouldn't do.
I point out already the kinds of people who get into a fight on the subway. We're ticking time bombs.
Apparently,
anyway.
it was like a 60-year-old guy who got killed.
He
was an old man.
So the question is, was he killed by another old man in an old
I
man
have no
argument?
idea.
Or was he killed by the stereotypical, in quotes, gangbanger?
I didn't read the Google News that much more than that, so you can go read it if you want more details, which I'm sure the police collected over those many hours they were all hanging out there. There were a lot of top brass on that street corner.
Mine was, so the thing I saw was much less interesting in the end. You know, I wondered what was going on. I tried to I was like, I'm pressed. Could I get a statement? And the cop was like, even if I knew, I'm not telling anyone. So I gave up and I went about my business. And later on Twitter, I learned that it was a AIDS activist had climbed a flagpole and hung a flag. And apparently that entails shutting down the entire park, having every cop in the world there, cordoning off everything. And there's like 20 cops standing around watching one dude very slowly in a cherry picker cut the flag down.
They couldn't send 19 of those cops to a bad neighborhood instead?
No, and they had this terrorism rapid response unit there too that I learned about by Googling because I saw their special
Well, how do you know
truck.
he didn't put a bomb on with the flag up on that
Because the
flagpole?
dude who hung the flag was still there yelling about how he put the flag up. I'm so unafraid of terrorists that it annoys and amazes me the reactions. But then again, New York is much calmer than Boston.
I guess.
Remember when they overreacted to that little LED light show that was put all around the city?
Anyway, on all the threads on the internet, I sort of joked I should run to be, mayor on the platform that I'll, make the police not suck. Because also, in somewhat related New York cop news, there have been 2 or 3 good cops. One of them has a website that doesn't look very good.
Oh, here's a million websites of police scanners we can just listen to live from anywhere in the country.
Nice. But anyway, there have been a few cops in New York City who were just exposing the hell out of the police. He's like, look, I brought in an audio video recorder to the police meeting. Here's the precinct chief guy talking about the quota that doesn't exist, but he's saying he says straight up, you guys got to go arrest more dudes.
Well, I thought about this a lot. If I were, New York City is complicated, but when we lived in Beacon upstate, if I ran the police enforcement division in that city, I would basically
Hot fuzz.
Not bother with speeders anymore and kind of the basic stuff. And I would just I would just have one dude whose sole job was to pull people over who don't turn their headlights on at night or in the rain. And I'd make the fine $5,000.
Yeah, I'd go after all this stuff that people don't, think to go after.
That's actually worth going after.
And if you're in a small town, you can go after bike thieves. You can go after all kinds of good stuff.
Also, I'd really go after littering because it'd be it's low-hanging fruit there.
Yep. But yeah, no, they go after watching a guy put a flag in a flagpole, and and then they do stuff like have quotas they're not supposed to have. But yeah, if I could get elected mayor somehow, I would take that guy, that whistleblowing cop, who was like, hey, there's a quota and published it and everything, and I would say, you're the commissioner now. Boom.
In New York City,
and all the cops would freak the fuck out and maybe try to kill me, but doesn't matter.
I'd like the idea of every cop having to wear a GoPro or equivalent whenever they're on duty.
Of course.
So, some special police scanner.
I would make all this shit
grant.
public. Police meetings. Yeah, it's fucking public. Might as well be town council meeting.
You do need to have the ability to meet privately. Say the detectives are figuring out the serial killer case.
Okay.
You don't want the guy who committed the crimes watching.
But I'm talking about the meeting where the police get together in the morning and they're like, all right, guys, this is what we're doing today.
But what if in that meeting they're like, all right, remember that serial killer?
They don't do that. Those meetings are pretty... Have you ever been to one of those meetings?
I actually have in Detroit.
They're so boring. It's like, all right, guys, listen up. We got the quota that we're not supposed to have. We're going to use a different word to describe it, but you guys are behind or ahead. Good job or bad job. And look at this wall. Those are the people who are wanted. You'll notice there's a new guy.
In Detroit, they had the wall of unsolved murders that had not been given up on
look
yet.
at that new face on the wall. Just remember it before you go out. That guy hasn't paid child support in 6 months. If you see him, bag him in. And, we're setting up a little checkpoint over on this street today because there's going to be a drunken party.
Why can't it be more like RoboCop or Gotham Central?
It is not like that at all. That is the... I see no reason why that meeting could not be public.
So, This is some old news that's old from a number of angles, but I realize it hasn't been talked about a lot on the technology front. Now, sadly, Slashshot linked to an article about it, so I thought, oh, this is a good opportunity to talk about it. The article is so poorly written and it beats around the bush so much. It actually doesn't really explain what the problem is until like, until like 40 paragraphs in.
That must be a real clean bush, nice and circular shaped.
You could beat around in a regular bush just as easily as a nice and clean bush.
Well, that's beating off in the bush, not beating around the bush.
You've never been to the bush.
No, I haven't.
So here's the deal on the highest level, because I swear you don't care about the details under this. Though part of the problem is that you don't care about the details under this, but part of the solution is that those details are so old they don't matter. So people who live in rural areas are having calls to their landlines dropped with a surprising frequency. We're talking...
Right, as in you live in the sticks, someone tries to call you, the phone doesn't ring.
Now, we're talking like early AT&T iPhone levels, like greater than 20% of inbound calls just never make it or get dropped within the first few seconds.
Yep.
Now, you might think, oh, duh, ancient rural infrastructure not
Yeah, it's
maintained.
probably just really shitty phone lines and phone switches that are like 100 years old and they don't work anymore.
You're probably picturing those one-way power lines they use in really podunk towns where it grounds out to the earth around the end by your house.
Yeah, and guess what?
That's not the problem.
Yeah, that shit fucking works, actually.
In fact, those lines are actually higher quality than the lines in most cities, and they're much better maintained.
Yeah.
The problem is...
They don't have digital congestion. They have a freaking separate wire for everybody.
So let's go back to the early days of, Ma Bell, the old days of phone systems in the United States, like the 80s. So in that time, there was this sort of analog system with some digital components of routing calls around. And it was actually really, really, really complex. The technology around it was amazing, especially for the day, especially considering how much of it was analog and mechanical. And you had to be able to route a call from anywhere in the country to anywhere else in the country. And
it might have taken a while to connect. Like you call, you wait, and it rings, but eventually it fucking worked all the time.
Do you remember, Scott, from the 80s, how long, like when they taught you, remember all those classes in like elementary school? Like, here's how to do a letterhead when they teach you like how long to let the phone ring?
No one taught me how long to let the phone ring. I just let the phone ring until I heard ringing.
Ah, really? Really? We were told 6 rings for a local call, 8 rings for a long distance call,
no one ever taught me anything
10
like
rings
that.
for an international call. Because no one had answering machines or voicemail.
Well, that's true.
I remember when we got our first answering machine. It was a big fucking deal.
But I just, you wait on the phone long enough, some number of rings until you get tired of fucking waiting.
Yeah. Thing is, you don't want to wait too long because that was impolite. Because what if the person was screening their calls?
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway.
Don't do that.
So all that infrastructure had, of course, a ridiculous body of legislation around it. And one of the things had to do with how to pay, because there's the local loop, then there's like the more like the regional telco, then there's the switching between like different like higher level regions and long distance calls. It used to be that it was a long distance call to call someone who lived like the next town over.
Yeah, basically, it's like, we could dial, you have a 7-digit phone number, and to this day, this still works, right? You could just dial somebody's 7-digit phone number straight up, as long as they're in the same area code, right? But if they're in a different area code, you had to dial the area code. Now the area code is basically part of the phone number.
But even then, it wasn't always, sometimes you needed to dial the area code, even if they were in your area code, if you were in a region where there'd been a recent split. Like, Detroit was the 313 area code, and then it filled up, and then
you had to dial 1, which is the country code for U.S., and then the number.
The funny thing is, back then, 1 meant I am making a call that I have to ask my parents to do first because it costs money. Lots of money.
Local calls were free. You didn't have to pay anything extra above your standard pay money to keep the phone on flat rate.
Actually, we paid a flat rate for our first phone line. We paid for 450 local minutes on our secondary phone line.
I had a second phone line that I got way later, only for a few years in the late 90s for interneting.
Yep. Thing is, after we got cable, we kept that second phone line because that was basically like my own personal phone line. It was awesome.
I had my own personal phone line also, but I didn't put a phone on it.
We used it because there was no, voice chat in games back then. So we would all like use that phone number and do conference calls and three-way calling with phones.
Well, I
and
couldn't
everything.
do that if I had a regular modem on that line as well.
See, we had a cable modem, but then we'd play like a quick death match, and like I'd call person A. They would use their like conference calling from their parents to call person B. And we'd usually do this chain to get a bunch of people in there and use it as voice chat while we played quick death match.
Could not do that. Anyway,
so for example, rural local loops cost way more to build and maintain than the ones in cities.
Yep.
So those local loops, there's regulations saying they got to charge more for terminated calls in those regions. We live in a world where none of that matters or even is accessible or visible to the vast majority of people. So as a result, the regulations haven't really changed much. And
right. It was basically an incentive. It was saying, hey, look, phone company, we want these people who live in the sticks to be able to have phone service, because if you charge, them the same amount you charge someone who lives in New York City, it's not economically viable for you, which means you're not going to build phone lines for the people in the sticks. So people in the sticks won't have phones. So we're going to allow you to charge more money to people living in, for phone calls to the sticks, so that you will want to build phone lines in the sticks, and everyone in the whole country will have phones, including the sticks. And thus, that is why everyone in the country, pretty much no matter where you live, even the extreme sticks, you can get a phone line pretty easily.
So here's the problem. Nowadays, there's a million websites you can just buy phone numbers. I have on my phone, basically, that XKCD said it best. Those first 3 digits in your phone number are basically random. And your area code is basically just where you lived around 2004.
Yeah, pretty much.
So the numbers don't really make sense like that anymore. You just dial 1 for everything if you dial 1 at all, and all this stuff.
You go to contacts, you touch the person's name, it
basically,
rings.
Call routing will be routed via a least cost model, meaning you'll route to these a call will be routed to some discount carrier because it's cheaper. That discount carrier then tries to route it as cheaply as possible to make a profit between what they get paid and what they have to pay to terminate the call. And what they're doing is, if they have to terminate the call somewhere where there is a statutory rate that's high and they would lose money on the call, they just fucking drop it. Even though that's totally illegal. The FCC apparently has fined no one for this because it's so hard to prove. They don't have any resources. It's basically an unenforceable set of legislation. And there's a loophole. Rather than terminating the call, you know what I can do? Just keep looping it forever and never actually let it terminate. I didn't drop it. I just wait for the other person to give up.
The other thing that's going on is, you can read about this to get all the details, but a lot of places like, 1-900 number places and call centers set up their phone centers in specific places in the country,
thus overloading those places.
Yeah, that have certain rates. And then what happens is, there's a big fight about this because Google Voice basically blocks entire sections of the country that have these phone call places in them, with these 1-900 numbers, because they don't want to have to pay to service that bullshit.
Now,
when it's just bullshit. And there's a few people who live there get screwed by that. But the real phone companies like AT&T say, hey, what the fuck? How come Google is allowed to not service that unprofitable bullshit area, but we're not allowed to not service that because there's a regulation that makes us do it, and Google isn't following that regulation with Google Voice, and Google Voice is not the same thing as the actual phone company.
Now, couple this with the fact that for someone like me, I don't care. I don't want those people to be on my phone network because the few people who are caught up in the sort of the collateral damage. I don't know any of those people. I will never call them. They'll never call me.
Yeah, and it's like, if you're in the sticks, they already don't have cell phone service. So even though we still have this guarantee of wired service because of this old regulation and old system. It's like, well, there's no cell phone service, so really there is effectively
But think of this.
service.
This is an example of something I used to do in the early days of email. If I'd run an email server, I could set up filters. I would basically block emails from any IP address in China, because that's where all the spam was coming from for a time.
Yeah, and who in China is actually going to email me, or who has a hosted server in China that is sending legitimate emails to me?
Yep. Nowadays, that all comes from hack people behind cable modems and whatever. But anyway, so this is an interesting problem that is obsolete to young people who leave rural areas, because I haven't had a landline since the year 2000. I will probably never have a landline again. And sure, there is a drawback. I can't have my guaranteed phone service if the cell networks and power all go out, like wired landlines do. I just don't care.
Don't care.
Don't care at all.
We're good.
You got any news?
Oh, new. You want
Yeah,
news?
I want
Oh.
News.
Okay, so I don't know if anyone realized this. I'm sure everyone realized this, but iTunes 11 just came out, which is actually much delayed. It was supposed to come out around the iPhone 5 time. You know, they announced it along with the new iPad and everything recently, and the iPad Mini, and then and everything like that. And it didn't appear, but now it has appeared. So. First of all, it's actually a major change. It's not iTunes 10 point something. It's 11. It's a whole new version. The UI is significantly changed. You can see what they did is they did sort of a clever thing where they updated it graphically, right? But they also sort of gave it this new UI, but they put it, if you go to the menus, you can change enough options to basically make it the same size and shape as the old one. Like there's no sidebar with all those choices in it, but if you go to view sidebar, oh look, the sidebar's back. It looks like it used to, right? But if you don't do that, it has this top bar. And actually, I kind of like the top bar, but it requires more clicks to do certain things. So it's sort of this weird balance, like it better, less efficient. But the major thing about iTunes 11 is a lot of people, they be hating on iTunes.
But wait. You're saying that people are flipping out because a UI of a general use software product used by both technologists and non-technologists changed?
Well, no, I'm saying that that's expected, right? What I'm saying is there are people who already hated iTunes, period, regardless of, oh my God, it changed, right? They just hate iTunes, period.
I'll admit, I haven't used iTunes in like 6 years. I have no use for it. I'm done with it.
You don't have an idevice.
I don't have an iDevice
so
anymore.
You don't need it.
And even if I did...
What do you mean, even if you did? If you have an iDevice, you got to use iTunes. Unless you jailbreak or something.
I pretty much only listen to music on Spotify and my own MP3s that I just drag out of my file system right now.
I got, Amazon, you got to, you want to buy some apps in the App Store? That's iTunes.
Yeah.
You want to sync? That's iTunes.
Podcasts? Well, a lot of people have trouble with podcasts now.
I don't. It's always worked for me just fine. But
well,
anyway.
Apparently what the thing that changed is you can't do certain kinds of organizational tasks manually anymore. And the podcast stuff in iTunes 11 is like
same?
pegged by some values in the ID3 tags. So people who don't use like the RSS feeds and like manually download the MP3s from people who don't properly set up their ID3s or do it through like...
That's never been different. That's never... If you download something that's not through an RSS feed, iTunes thinks it's music. It doesn't know it's a fucking podcast.
So there apparently was a way in iTunes 10 and earlier to click on it and be like, no, this is a podcast.
I've never seen that in my entire life of using iTunes since the iPod Mini was out. That's never happened.
However, I could select the files, click on more info, and click and change the setting to podcast. As of iTunes 11, this no longer is an option.
I've never seen that as an option ever.
It was an option. Here's screenshots.
People are friggin' crazy. Stop fucking... This is the thing about Apple stuff, right? And I love it and hate it, and everyone,
I agree with what you're about to say.
If
you're going to use it... Go all in. Don't try to use
If you are using Apple shit, you have to just don't change fucking anything. Just do it the way they want you to do it and don't fuck around with it, right? Everyone, if you're an option changing, customizing kind of person, Apple ain't for you, right? Don't be using Apple. And for me, when it comes to phones and this really important thing I carry around all day, as open sourcey as I am, and as openness is a high priority and freedom is a high priority, the higher priority is... This thing is really important. It better fucking work, so I don't fuck with it. Default, everything, right? And when it comes to something else, maybe I don't care much about, I don't care if it continues to work, right? If it breaks, big deal. It's not so important. Yeah, let's fuck around with this. That'll be fun times. So iTunes, pretty important. My phone, I don't fuck with it. Just do it the way it's supposed to be used. Don't go and looking for weird options, because you know what? I use this unsupported feature, and then I complain when they took it away from me. When my weird hack no longer works. Curses. It's like it was a weird hack. It was not promised to work. It wasn't a feature, right? And they didn't promise to even keep their features. So, of course, they didn't promise to keep their weird hacks. The point is that iTunes 11, regardless of its graphical updates, which I kind of okay with, the Windows version, which is the one I use, is vastly improved because even... I never really had a big problem with it before. It was crashy. It would crash. It would flake out. I would have problems with it, such as I would try to do like the music streaming through iTunes from my PC to my HTPC, and it would sometimes just stop, and I had to restart iTunes to make it work again. Stuff like that. Now, all that stuff just works perfectly every time. It's way faster, and it never crashes, and it's so perfect, and life is very pleasant. So if you're one of those iTunes hatey people and you can get over, whatever weird customization and organization OCD thing you have to do and just let iTunes do what it wants to do and, buy into it, it is vastly improved with its no crashy, no flakiness. So there you go.
So last thing, a very brief news. Here's a guy on the internet, /dot.
Oh.
SATA DVD drives that don't suck for CD ripping. He needs a modern CD drive to rip his
Just
CDs.
buy the $20 one on Newegg.
Yeah, so basically what he's pointing out is that modern, like new SATA CD-ROMs are way, way slower than old ones. They're just not as well made. They don't read as well. They keep rereading. And he goes on and on. He proves it's a problem. And I have his answer right here.
I believe it.
Have ripped all your CDs to MP3 15 years ago.
I agree.
Optionally, it is faster to go to Pirate Bay than it is to rip a single CD.
Depending on your internet connection, yes.
I'd argue that almost all modern internet connections are faster than ripping a CD.
Mine is. All right, what else is there?
That's it. I just found this whole thing kind of funny. I mean, I have an optical drive.
Yeah, and you know what? My 32X whatever SATA CD, SATA DVD ROM, whatever. Yeah, it might be kind of slow at ripping a CD compared to maybe my Plex Store 8432, which was, probably the best at it, right? Because even though its burning was not that great, the 32 burning, that speed hasn't really increased lately. And yeah, no one gives a shit about optical drives now, so they make them way cheap. But you know what? It's still crazy fast compared to my 4X CD-ROM of the olden days. It's like, oh no, it's 5 minutes instead of 3 minutes. Ooh.
Well, I don't need optical drives anymore, and I need to use an optical drive in my laptop for one thing, so I'm going to buy like a USB.
If you're ripping that many CDs to MP3, that the time matters, that you care that much about it, and you're not willing to just go to Pirate Bay and download it.
You really should have done it 10 years ago.
Yes, but you could just buy, and you're willing to buy optical drives, just buy the really expensive one, or instead of the $20 one, or buy one of those really tall things that has a whole bunch of CD drives and it meant for, mass burning, and just use it for mass ripping.
I also suspect, though I didn't really read, all his stuff too deeply, but he's trying to use FLAC, and he might have some other I/O bottlenecks.
Oh, well, it depends. I haven't looked at this guy's tests for speed. He could be a dumbass, and it could be his encoding that is slow and not his ripping.
That is possible. But anyway, I just thought this was kind of funny, so...
Yeah. Oh, man, the new floppy drives. I just bought one. It's so slow. I can't save the data off all my floppies.
Oh, my God. I wonder if any of my floppies are still readable.
Good
Floppies were really susceptible to bit rot.
Some, probably. Maybe some files be bad. Maybe some will work.
I've got one somewhere that's got my old hacked copy of Stunts 4D Racing.
I have a USB 3.5-inch floppy drive.
Cracked by Killfit.
I have a drive. We can do it.
Anyway, it's Things of the Day. If you've never seen an old Silly Symphony, and I'll bet many of you young kids haven't, check this out. Silly Symphony Music Land. This is a wonderful little 9-minute and 12-second animated short from 1935 where the Island of Jazz and the Island of Symphonic Music have a death match to the death. And the top comment asks if there is, in fact, a land of metal.
There should be. Someone should remake
Someone's got to animate Metal Land and just mash it up with this video.
Electronic Land.
What I find funny is the weird old sensibilities from 1935 that the guy flirts with the girl basically by chasing her around while she tries to get away from him.
Yeah.
You see that in a lot of old
Welcome to
cartoons.
every Pepe Le Pew ever.
Also, the fact that this is almost 100 years old and it might as well have been made today, other than the sensibilities, is kind of amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the big thing to take away from this is something we already should all know, right? Is like, look, our great-grandparents only like classical music, and our grandparents like jazz music, and they said that jazz music is the devil. And then the grandparents told our parents that rock music is the devil.
And now
not
they're
like our
that
good
dubstep is
not,
the devil.
Not like our jazz music, that rock music is the devil. And then some of the parents with the rock music learned the lesson, but some of the other ones were like, that rap music is the devil. And then now you've got that dubstep is the devil. Come on, people, all right?
Can't figure it. You know why they can't figure it out? Everyone only lives through one cycle of it.
Some people, I've figured it out. Some people have figured it out. No matter how many children I have, be it 0 or a billion.
I figured it out by watching VH1.
I will never tell any punk kids that the dubstep or the rap step or the 10, whatever crazy bullshit music there is when I'm a 90-year... Yeah, when I'm a 90-year-old man, whatever the kids are listening to is going to be awesome. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's all over my pop filter.
So the my thing of the day.
Scott, I got dubstep all over my pop filter.
That's great. This guy named The Whistler on YouTube, he mashed up one of my favorite games, ice hockey for the NES.
And
he changed it into lockout hockey, as is appropriate.
So wait, he mashed up ice hockey with ice hockey.
That is right. So you should watch this here video. It is a good video of funniness and ice hockey.
In the meta moment, the book club book is The Great Gatsby. You probably have some time to read it. I have a feeling we're not doing that show until early next year.
Yeah, next year.
Not due to
probably
reading time?
after the MagFest.
MagFest.
Which is another thing to talk about in the meta moment because it's actually soon now.
Oh my God, MagFest is coming. It is right after New Year's in the Gaylord.
MagFest is near Washington, D.C. It is 4 days, 24/7, no nights off. It is Thursday morn through Sunday night.
They have a physical arcade the size of a football field.
Gaming, music, concerts.
Last year, we started playing
handful
Eclipse
of panels
at midnight and finished at 5 in the morning and then passed out.
Gaming, drinking, panels, concerts, not stopping 4 days. Why are you not going to MagFest if you are listening to the show?
I like MagFest almost as much as PAX. They're different, but they both are crucial to my enjoyment. They're like the two sides of what gaming cons need to be.
My only regret not going to MagFest sooner, because I did know about it sooner than I went to it, is not going to PAX sooner and not having the money to go to PAX sooner.
Not going to PAX sooner is literally one of two things in my entire life that I regret.
Anyway... other meta moment
We have an official Counter-Strike server, Counter-Strike Go. I'm going to add some new maps to it. You kids should be playing on it. It's pretty tight.
I'm about to send the newsletter again, and I think I'm going to send it with this other thing that is not MailChimp, but is made by the MailChimp people because it's way simpler and easier to do than MailChimp, but it's run by the same peoples. So, don't freak out if the next newsletter looks different. Whatever.
All right. And of course, PAX East a ways out, but Enforcer applications just went up.
So since it's almost entirely sold out, if not entirely sold out, and you want to go, Enforcing is a great choice. In fact, I plan to do it for the first time ever so that my foot will go doing the walking to match my mouth that has done the talking.
Yes, Scott and I promised long ago someday we'll enforce, so we're putting we're on shit talking.
Also,
doing
I've spent, at the last PAX East, I spent a lot of time doing stuff that, I could have enforced.
I feel like I want to do everything I can do.
I had a couple free hours at the last PAX East, so if I enforce, it's going to be jam-packed this time.
I'm going to see PAX East, PAX from every possible angle.
Also, I can get food in Enforcer Land instead of having to go to get food at the horrible food locations near PAX East, which is a great idea.
All right, So,
Rim had this show idea, and I poo-pooed it, but I'm going to let him do it anyway. And so if you like this show, then we'll just let Rim pick Monday show ideas and do them even if I poo-poo them, because apparently he's right about what you want to hear. But if you don't like the show, or you think it's boring, or it doesn't get a lot of listens or whatever, then I was right, and we're right to poo-poo Rim's
Scott,
stupid
so if
show
you're right,
ideas.
then what should we have done this show on?
We should have just sat around watching the Giants game that's about to start in an hour and a half.
You know what I feel we should do if we don't have Monday topics? Just do the news thing of the day and then end. It's still a show. Our discussion of the news on Geeknights Mondays is relevant, and that tech news is in fact 90% of what anyone cares about in the tech world, other than how-tos.
Then why don't we just make Twit anyway?
Because we do it better.
Send in Monday show ideas to the forum or our email, geeknights@frontrecruit.com, or Twitter or Facebook or Google Plus or whatever you got.
So I've realized over the course of my project management and design and IT over the years that I know a lot about networking. And
you do know a lot about that networking thing, considering you paid a lot of money to have a degree in it.
What's funny is, despite being an expert at networking to the lowest level. I can talk about how bullshit is encoded on different types of Ethernet at the physical level of how you make a 1 and how you make a 0, all the way up to switches and all that. That was a big part of my education at RIT. Never really done that as my job.
Well, you didn't work at Verizon. You worked at, the hospital and other places.
Even at the hospital, I didn't really do it. I just told other people what to do. Like, it's funny, at RIT, I took a class where we had a mock house and we ran cables and learned about like how to deal with power cables versus Ethernet cables and how to like architect all this stuff and differences and server closet placement and the architecture. And yeah, all that actual work that's really fun to do gets outsourced to people who get paid barely minimum wage.
Well, you have the degree. You don't have to do this grunt labor.
But that's the fun stuff.
And then you could go be a grunt laborer. You could have not gone to college and been like a plumber and done all kinds of fun stuff.
No, it's
and
only
actually
fun when it's
made a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you'd be working like crazy because everyone's
I did
got
occasionally,
fucking
like I pulled
toilets.
network cables through data centers at IBM and at that hospital, and
All right.
I've dealt with all that stuff to a degree, but I've never really done networking. I've never set up a router or switch as part of my job.
Most people have them set up already. That's a big part of the problem. Is by the time you learned how to set them up, they had already set most of them up, and they are not oft replaced.
So I have a project going on at my work right now. We're making a network sniffer to read something called the Fix protocol, which is
your favorite.
It's just a big part of my life. I'm a member of the Fix protocol board, the consortium,
the W3 of Fix,
the league, the consortium that like makes the Fix protocol, writes the specs for it and everything. I speak at these conventions about it. I'm actually going to Istanbul probably soonish to probably teach people there how to use it. I feel like we should do a show on that sometime.
The thing no one cares about.
Yeah, you think no one cares about it? It is so easy.
We're gonna learn from the results of this show whether the poo-pooers are.
All right, if you don't
right
want to poo-poo,
wrong.
I'll say this: one, if you know the Fix protocol and are also a programmer, it's pretty easy to get a relatively high-paying job in the financial
sector. If you're
sector.
a programmer, it's relatively easy to get a job, period.
It's
as long
even
as you're willing
easier
to live in New York or San Francisco.
if you know the Fix protocol. But again, you have to be willing to live in New York, maybe Chicago, or Sao Paulo.
Yeah, they have commodity trading
Istanbul.
in Chicago, right?
Yeah, the CBOE.
Yep.
Anyway, so here's what we need. We have a thing that'll read these Fix logs. So, the Fix protocol is kind of like middleware. Think of it that way, like TibRV or whatever. You're sending messages back and forth. It's like a point-to-point protocol.
It's like HTTP, but for stock trading.
And you have an engine on either end that deals with the Fix bullshit and then gives your application the data it needs. Like, here's an order.
Yeah, so the application is like the web browser, and the engine is like Apache, but for Fix instead of for HTTP.
So in the financial world, unlike, for example, in HTTP, I trust my application. I never give one shit what went over the wire, like what my GET request looked like, unless I'm troubleshooting like a problem with my own web server.
Yeah, well, I do if I'm a developer, right? But you don't care if you're a user.
So in the financial world, the users actually care too, because they have an order management system, an OMS, the thing that the stock trader sits there
because
and says,
because if my website visiting fucks up, oh, big deal, right?
Someone
if
can't buy tickets to Book of Mormon for an hour until we fix it.
Well, no, that's serving fucks up. That's a big deal. I'm talking about website visiting mess up. No one cares.
I can't buy tickets to Book of Mormon for an hour.
But stock trading messes up. Both people on both ends give a lot of fucks. All the fucks if that shit doesn't work.
Sometimes more fucks than are necessary, but
I'm just saying they give all the fucks if money has a problem.
I gave a somewhat controversial discussion on a panel in Mumbai a while ago where I said that a lot of the things that people talk about in terms of like latency in these connections don't actually matter. And a lot of people really liked it and a lot of people really didn't like it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So the users of this stuff actually care what went over the wire, because say my order management system, I'm like, yeah, I want to send a new order. And then nothing happens. My order looks like it's open, but I never get any executions. I'm like, what the fuck? So it'd be really nice if I knew what happened, because a lot of order management systems suck, or something might go wrong. Like my order might not actually get acknowledged, or some border fixed engine acknowledges it, but then for whatever reason, downstream, they don't actually do anything with it.
Yeah, shit like that happens.
So I'd like to be able to see, kind of in real time, the actual individual fixed messages, which, my life for many years working as a production engineer for an algorithmic trading shop, I would just, grep and sed and tail log files and tell traders what they needed to know. But that's really expensive to hire someone like me to do something like that.
And it's also how much coverage can you get, right? That log file's probably gigantic. How much did you miss? You're grepping and setting looking for specific things.
I don't miss anything because I'm a fucking badass at this business.
I'm just saying, people are looking for specific things. You're not watching every single log line 24/7, right?
Well, that's a whole separate discussion of monitoring. So say I have a thing.
Well, that's what looking at log files is.
Yeah, but you want to automate that shit.
Of course.
You want to have, in the minimum, you want a process that's like tailing the log with a regular expression, looking for like a log4j error and sending you an email.
That's a good idea.
That's like babies first. But anyway, so the fixed protocol, people who aren't technologists like me are the ones who really need to see those messages, like the traders themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the compliance people, they want to know if there's malfeasance. They want to know what's going on the wire. They want to keep archives and records and all this. So one way we do this, we have a little agent that'll read these log files from, where the log files are written, the engine logs. I sent this message. I got this
but
message.
then you're trusting the engine to write the logs that are correct. The engine could,
Okay.
if someone could write a devious engine that sends one thing over the network and logs something different. So you're looking for malfeasance, and actually it wasn't malfeasing, but it was. But it doesn't say it was.
So that is one thing that is actually not much of a concern.
Really? Okay.
Not at all. And sometimes some engines don't actually write these log files. Say performance. Say you're sending so many messages per millisecond that you don't have enough disk I/O to write them all out to disk.
You just got to get more disk I/O.
Yeah, but what if you hit limitations? Maybe.
Amazon actually sells disk I/O. You type in the number of I/O ops per second you want, and you pay more money the bigger the number is.
So anyway, let's say that, even if I have the thing that's going to read these fixed logs, and let's assume that they're legit and I don't have to worry about that stuff, there's still the possibility of, impact. Let's say I'm running this thing on a server that's doing real stock trading. Well, that's one more process taking up however much RAM it takes up, using CPU cycles, sending stuff out over a network to somewhere. So maybe I want to get this stuff over the network too. So I go to some developers. I'm like, here's the spec. Make a network sniffer just to read this stuff directly off the network.
Well, you basically take Wireshark. You go to Wireshark. You find the code for putting the Ethernet in promiscuous
All right, so
mode.
I was about to ask you, Scott, how would you do this?
Well,
as a programmer, here's your project. I want you, and I give you some basic parameters for how this is going to work. I want you to be able to sniff an arbitrary network interface or multiples. Read data payloads, the top level, the payload of the TCP/IP packet, and parse it, log it somewhere, and send it on to a server to do more bullshit.
All right, well, there's two ways to do it. One way is if I'm on the server that's doing the communicating. Is it a Linux server?
You're not going to be on the server that's doing the communicating. Because otherwise, what's the fucking point? The point of this is that it's not impacting. I have it on some other device.
Okay, so I put on another device.
Yep. So assume you have effectively unlimited resources. You have the most powerful, normal, 2U server you're going to get.
Sure, whatever. I had to plug it in very close to, in fact, exactly next to the server that I'm not allowed to be on, right? So close, in fact, that all the packets that are going to that computer also go to my computer because they're on the same hub, or if it's a switch.
There's no such thing as hubs.
Well, then you have to go and connect the switch so that the two ports are hubbed. So it's
that's not how that works.
So the switch, when you can, because normally what a switch does is once it figures out which port certain packets belong to, it only sends them down that port. But you can tell the switch, hey, anything that's going to port 2, send it to port 1 also.
That's not the same as making them like a hub. If they were like a hub, then you, the third party that's sniffing, could theoretically send a message to that network segment. But no, that's not how we do this. We do something called a port span.
Okay, so how is that
port mirror.
How is that not hubbing?
So what that basically does is just sends a copy of everything that goes over one or more arbitrary ports to your port, but you can't talk back.
Oh, so it's not exactly a hub. I can't say anything. I just listen only.
You can't say, and the thing is,
only listening.
Yes, and saying stuff wouldn't help you anyway. How would that help?
What? I don't know. It wouldn't.
Okay, I'm trying to trap you here.
Yeah, there's no reason I need to talk. But if I'm hubbed, if we were on a hub, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yep.
But if I got a hub from 10 years ago, plugged in and put 2 computers into it, I could see everything the other computer does.
Yes.
In both directions. So that's all I need to do is see every packet that goes to and from the other computer in both directions.
All right. So say there's there might be an arbitrary number of different computers on the subnet you're listening to, all sending fixed traffic, and you want to sniff all of them.
Well, I can
on the same interface.
Well, I mean, is there enough traffic going over all of those other computers that it's going to completely flood my one Ethernet cable connection of 1 gigabit,
all right,
so
that's
that
a
I will
valid
lose
concern.
capacity?
So,
I mean, I can't monitor all of Google's HTTP traffic with 1 gigabit of bandwidth.
So let's assume for now that aside from a crazy peak, you're fine. You can reasonably assume that you will not saturate your own pipe.
All those packets going to and from all those other computers, right, are being copied to my computer, right, and there's no bandwidth worry whatsoever.
Yep.
None. Okay.
So, and no like median bandwidth.
All right.
Like,
now, when those packets get copied, are the packets being rewritten so that
nope, identical.
So they're not being readdressed to me. They still have the original addresses on them.
Original everything. They're unmolested.
So I do need to put my Ethernet card in promiscuous mode in order to capture them all.
All right. Do you know what promiscuous mode does?
It basically says, hey, Ethernet card, usually anytime you see a connection with a MAC address that's not yours, you throw that shit in the garbage.
Yep.
Do not throw that shit in the garbage. Any bits you see touching you at all, capture those bits and make them available to my software.
So you want to know some interesting things? In token ring networks, if you go into promiscuous mode...
I did not know token ring had a promiscuous mode. I thought that was an Ethernet thing.
So you'll basically no, you'll be able to read...
Are there MAC addresses on token rings?
You want to do a show on token ring?
No.
I can talk a lot about...
No one uses token ring anymore except old places that have COBOL.
You don't have switches or hubs. You have MAUs, MAUs, multi-access units.
Sure,
anyway, if you go into promiscuous mode... Basically, the MAU you're connected to could say, no, fuck you. You can't. You're not authorized.
Well, there are ways, interesting ways I've heard of detecting people who go into promiscuous mode.
There are indeed.
But we don't care if anyone detects us in promiscuous mode
because we're legit.
This is
we're
our
blessed.
network. We're allowed to be in promiscuous mode.
Yes, your network administrator set up this port span.
This shit is on fucking purpose, right? Okay, so step 3 is I need to write a program similar to Wireshark that looks at all those fucking packets hitting my Ethernet port and writes them all the fuck down.
All right.
And do I have enough space to write all these fuckers down?
Let's say yes.
Okay, I put in so much RAM and hard drive space that I can write all these down, or I can process them so fast as they come in. I don't need to write them down. I can write down my results, and I don't need to hold on to them. But
all right. So how do you differentiate between, say, there's 2 different computers running, whatever, this fixed stuff?
Well, first I have to filter, because remember, this is raw network traffic, right?
Yes.
We're not at the fixed protocol level yet.
Yeah, we're at the
So, for
TCP/IP
example,
level.
there's all these like fucking sins and acts in there and shit. I just got to get rid of a lot of that garbage and only make some sort of TCP. It's TCP/IP, right? It's not UDP?
It's TCP/IP.
Okay, so I need to filter.
You're already thinking you can rely on your own guaranteed delivery.
No, I'm saying that I'm going to look at I'm only going to get rid of any packet that's not a TCP/IP packet. All the ICMPs, throw them out, throw out all this garbage. I got to throw out anything. I know what a fixed header looks like, right?
Yeah, it's ASCII. It's like 8 equals fixed.
I would create some sort of filter such that only the fixed packets would be seen by my software, and any other kind of packet, sins and acts and all the garbage, just forget that shit.
All right, now do you know how to use the... Because you'll have to abstract a little bit, because TCP could theoretically send the same frame multiple times.
Oh, so...
Because computer A sends a TCP packet with a fixed message, sends 5 more packets with fixed messages. The other end basically says, I didn't get any of those, send them all again.
Yeah, so you see the same guy again. So I can remove duplicates.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Would there ever be a case in the fixed protocol where there would be intentional duplicate? Like it was sent and acknowledged and sent the same exact thing again
so
and acknowledged?
Acknowledgements within the protocol are separate from TCP/IP acknowledgements.
Well, that is very good, because then I can easily determine whether it was an intentional duplicate or a TCP/IP duplicate, and any TCP/IP level duplicates, I can just look and do like a hash of the the packets, and if they're identical to one I've already got,
I'm pretty sure
garbage.
the Wireshark libraries and the PCAP libraries can abstract out the TCP and just give you the packets that actually made it.
They can indeed do those things.
I've never actually gone down to that level.
If I were to utilize their libraries and not write it myself, there are many filtering features in Wireshark. That's pretty much what the fuck it does.
All right. So do you know? So how would you differentiate? Like, say there could be multiple fixed engines running on the same machine. Each one listens on a different port. So how do you differentiate all the different Like, say you want to differentiate the packets from one engine versus another engine. Do you know the tuple that defines the TCP/IP connection?
I would look it up in the fucking book. I could look at the packets themselves.
No, I'm just curious if you know it.
No, I don't know it. I don't. My job is Googling things, right? I would look at if I had to, and I couldn't Google that, right?
It's really simple.
I would just look at the packets. I would have one engine send a packet, the other engine send a packet. Go to my little program in Wireshark, look at the both of them, and I would be able to see with my eyeballs. Oh, that's the fucking difference right there. Boom, done.
All right.
Ta-da.
So you realize it's actually just the IPs on both ends.
Oh.
And the ports on both ends.
Okay.
And then
that was hard.
The protocol.
So
TCP or UDP.
So big deal.
Yeah, nice and easy.
All right.
All right.
So what?
I'm just trying to figure out how much about networking you know. I mean, this is selfish in my
enough.
Yeah.
To do whatever this is, to write programs that do networking.
All right. So this is working out okay. So how would you deal with the situation of a slow subscriber? So you're reading all these things just fine. You want to send them off to some other server. Say that server slows the fuck down way upstream.
Oh, the guy I'm sending them to?
Yeah.
I just buffer that shit up.
All right, so what if he's down for the whole day? You gonna buffer it all in RAM forever, and just what do you do when you
Who is this guy from another company or is it from my company?
Let's say it's your company.
Oh, so it's my own company?
It's your own company.
I just write that shit in some hard drive somewhere.
All right, so you'd buffer to a file?
Yeah.
Would the same thread send the message upstream and write it to the file, or would you do some sort of...
I would have some sort of policy that we would decide on in a meeting probably of like, hey, if the thing is down, what do we want to do? How long do we want to retry for? An hour? Do you care? How much do you care, business guy who actually this matters to? This is your thing, right? This is where your business matters. If you need this to be automatically sent no matter what, then I'll have a thing. We'll come up with a schedule like, hey, maybe we'll automatically resend after every hour, we'll start trying every 5 minutes, and if it stops working, we'll slow down to hourly, we'll slow down to daily. Do you really need me to keep the logs forever? Like, if it's 2 days old, do you even care anymore? Maybe we'll just throw them out when they're 2 days old, and we'll decide on something that makes sense for the business case of what to do.
All right, so what I was getting at with all this...
Maybe we'll do a manual resend, or, if you make a manual request for the log, I'll email it to you with
so
a button.
This kind of wraps up my whole ulterior motive here. A big problem with a lot of people who are young and coming just out of college and getting into industries, whatever they might be, programmers, everything. The separation of duties is actually really important. And unless you're like a startup of one, the programmer only makes arbitrary decisions on the things that matter to the programmer. But notice how immediately what Scott's asking me are, what are the constraints? What does this need to do? He's writing it to the business specification. That's what matters in the end.
Of course it matters.
What the code is, that most people I've met don't get that yet. They don't think about things in these terms.
Oh, so I'm just gonna retry forever, and then my computer runs out of memory.
Yeah, OOMs.
Great, good job.
Do you know what would you do on a Linux system if you in varlog messages an OOM was logged at some point?
It depends on what system's running. I mean, do I really care? I mean, if this OOM, something was already killed on the server, right?
Okay, but let's say it's the kernel OOM handler, not some individual application's OOM.
Right. So the kernel is killing some processes off.
Yep. Do you know how it does that?
Yeah, when it runs out of memory, it looks at, it has some priority system. Usually it kills off the biggest fucker.
Actually, usually it's entirely random. It kills a random PID, and it keeps doing that until it has enough
I've
memory.
only ever seen the kernel OM really go off with MySQL, eating up all the memory.
Yeah, I've seen that happen.
And I haven't seen it lately, not in a few years, but it always killed off MySQL every time. And that was the biggest fucker. So maybe it picks like a random bit in memory and sees who that bit belongs to, and that's how it picks the biggest guy. I don't know.
This is an aside, because the advice I usually give people is if you ever see an OOM written out varlog messages, just reboot, because there's no safe way to recover.
I would just reboot, but I mean, maybe it's, depending on the business use of that machine, maybe there is another process on the machine that is still not killed, and you care about it, and it killed, maybe the thing that got killed was some runaway cron.
The moral here,
that no one gives a shit about.
If you want to be a successful technologist in a real company, don't just think about, your silo of, I write the code that does this. Think about, all the different pieces along the way and do the parts that make sense. And that seems like simple advice, but people fresh out of college have never worked in these environments and seem to have a lot of trouble with that.
Well, the trouble I have is the opposite, right? It's like, I see these issues and I want to talk to these business people.
And you go to the guy who does my job and he doesn't care.
these people don't care, and they're all politics and bullshit, and they don't actually care about improving their product, or, you know, one guy wants one thing, one guy wants another thing. They're contradictory. They work for the same company. They don't cooperate with each other. The guy above both of those guys won't decide, and I'm not allowed to talk to them, or I don't even know who it is, you know? Everyone just passes the buck and is like, why are you talking to me about this low-level bullshit?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to, you know, I guess they don't want to micromanage, which is good. But it's like, hey, listen, you got 3 people working for you who are all saying different things and basically fighting over the same resources and want to use them in different ways. And they're all technologically inconsistent and impossible. And it's impossible to appease all of them physically. You need to lay down the law and tell me which one of these people to listen to. And also, I have suggestions that would, conflict with all the priorities of these 3 people who only care about themselves. And I got ideas that would actually help the customer, who no one seems to give a fuck about but me. Should we do what I say or what these people say? Come on. And there's nothing going on there.
It just amazes me how many companies just can't manage that. And it seems to almost always come down to human drama.
It is human drama.
That's why I love working for relatively small companies now, where that stuff really doesn't happen.
My place was relatively small, but we got bought, which seems to happen anywhere I go.
Every company I've worked for has been the smallest company I've ever worked for.
How about that?
I mean, I started with the U.S. federal government.
So
then I went to IBM.
So you tested how much you know about networking. Do I know enough about networking?
Yeah, you know a decent amount. The thing is, it's interesting that your first instinct is, let me Google that. I've talked to a bunch of different programmers, both like in my company, at other companies. I've been asking just friends I know all these same questions just to kind of, it was an interesting, simple question to see the extent to which different programmers know stuff. And here's my conclusion. Our IT computer scientists know more about networking than everyone else in the world.
Well, I had like 3 networking classes.
Except for a certain subclass of old timers who...
The guys who set up the router that you didn't get to set up because you set it up already? That guy?
More like the guys who were doing like the generation of coding before we had formalized coding disciplines, who basically had to know everything. And they will also look it up if they don't know it like you will.
Of course. You know, did you know about this the Unix command FC?
FC? Actually, I don't.
I learned about it yesterday, in fact, from this book about 21st century coding in C, which also taught me how to use auto tools, which I'll tell you about later. But yeah, good luck finding the man page for FC because it has the least documentation of any command ever.
The fuck is this? Man FC. Built-in. Runs in a built-in command. This isn't even...
Yeah, it is the least documented command ever, but I'll tell you about it after the show and how crazy useful it is.
Wait, I found it. All right.
That's the page I found. This is the only page I could find documenting this fucker.
Big bash alien. I'm still doesn't tell me what it does.
I'll tell you what it does when the show's over.
Okay, kids, look it up. This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music, Kat Lee for web design, and Brando K for the logos.
Be sure to visit our website at frontrowcrew.com for show notes, discussion, news, and more.
Remember, Geeknights is not 1, but 4 different shows. Sci-Tech Mondays, Gaming Tuesdays, Anime Comic Wednesdays, and Indiscriminate Thursdays.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.